waiting room?
I'm just now finding out.
Thank you.
Let's wait for the person in the wait room then.
So we're now live on YouTube, by the way.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the Wellbeing panel. It's the first Wellbeing panel that we've held, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more really. Obviously, it's been a long time since we actually met face to face, but we've got a couple of sets of minutes to go through. Okay. Obviously, many things have changed over the last few months, but for me, I think wellbeing should be at the forefront of all of our minds. I think it's a really important element of what we do as a council, and I really am looking forward to how we shape things in the future for our residents and our staff. I think it's really important. So for me, this is an important meeting and will be going forward for many months, if not many years, actually, with the COVID-19 situation. If I can just remind you to put your phones off or turn the ringer off, put them on mute, okay? I say this is a public meeting, so please be aware of your surroundings and your behaviour on screen. So we are live streamed. If you want to ask a question, I'll have the chat box open throughout. So if you want to ask a question, please put a comment in the chat box, and I will pick that up, and yeah, I'll then come to you for hopefully, if I can put it like that. Okay, so we'll get on with the formal agenda. Can I just receive any declarations of interest under procedural rule number 8?
Chairman, before you just move on to that matter, can I just do a roll call so we can just formally record
sorry.
who's in attendance? Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. If I call your names out, please could you confirm you are in attendance? That's Councillor Wymark.
Present.
Councillor Crotch.
Present.
Councillor Folger.
Present.
Councillor Hartley. It's not here. Councillor Lawn.
Present.
Councillor Murrell.
Particularly since COVID-19.
Not here with us. Councillor Prutton.
Present.
Councillor Shaw.
Here.
Councillor Starling.
Here.
Thank you. Leah, could you just rename Councillor Starling for us? Thank you. And Councillor Thomas.
Here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dawn, for that reminder. Okay, so if we can go to item number 1, which is to receive declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest? I'll take that as a no. Thank you. Right. Okay. 2, have we got any apologies for absence?
No, Chairman, no apologies.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so we need to move on to the item 3, which is the minutes of the last couple of meetings. Believe it or not, the first meeting we need to approve the minutes for was a wellbeing panel, which was held on the 7th of October, 2019, incredibly. Where are we? Sorry, what page we're on? So here we are. That's page 5 of your papers. If I go through them page by page, well, actually, there's only 3 pages, so I'll take them all in one hit. Basically, has anyone got anything that they're not sure about? Is there anything of any factual record that they feel needs correcting? No. Well, I'm happy to. I would propose them, but I wasn't actually there. If anyone was there, would like to propose these as a true record.
I'm happy to propose them, Chairman, if you want.
Thank you, Councillor Crotch. And Councillor Prutton? Councillor Shaw. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll sign them as a true record then. Thank you, virtually. And the other meeting we need to agree starts on page 8. And that was the joint meeting of the Economic Success Panel and the wellbeing panels. We had a joint meeting, as you recall, which I chaired, and I think it was a very, very good meeting actually. So I'm happy to propose them as a true record, unless anyone's got any points, factual points they believe are incorrect. I've read them through. I couldn't see anything. So is everyone happy with the minutes if we take them as a block?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chairman.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Folger. Okay, we'll sign them as a true record. Okay, thank you very much. So that's the minutes dealt with. So if we move on to matters arising, are there any matters arising from those minutes?
Councillor Thomas, Chairman.
Councillor Thomas, sorry.
Just a quick question on the minutes from the last Wellbeing meeting in October. There was notes in there about bringing on the NSFT as a partner. I didn't know if there's been any update on that at all. On page 4 or 5.
Can I just ask which bit specifically?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just bring it up again. Sorry, just scrolling up here. Yeah, under the health and wellbeing priorities. Yeah, on page 6, second paragraph from the bottom, a member suggested that Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust be added as a health and wellbeing partner of the council, reminding members of the distinction between poor mental health and mental illness. But I just didn't know whether we brought them on as a partner, or whether there's been any update to that at all, or whether we can have an update at some point in the future. Not
that I'm aware of, but yeah, I'm not that we're aware. Obviously, because things have, well, I mean, yeah, back in October, we should have actually.
I mean, I know a lot's happened since we've had a general election as well since then, haven't we? So
there's been an awful lot happened, really, incredibly. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, Councillor Thomas. I must say.
Sorry, Mike and Mike
oh.
Pershouse and Jamie Selby had their hands up. Sorry, just
lovely.
Oh, okay.
Chairman,
Mike, would you like
Chairman,
to?
I think there's 2 or 3 of us that
Jamie.
probably add something. There's always a lot to say in terms of mental health, and forgive me, Councillor Thomas, because I can't quite remember back in October exactly what the nature of the conversation was, but I absolutely agree with the sentiment of it, and mental health is a key aspect of what we put forward to councillors at that meeting in terms of our health and wellbeing framework and the sorts of issues that we're trying to assist our residents with. A number of things have happened. I'm sure Mike and Sarah will dip in. The one I wanted to mention is obviously we're making some progress in working with NSFT around discharge. So recognising the complications around people who are leaving inpatient mental health units and their re-entry back into the community. Obviously, it's an important aspect for us from point of view of being a housing authority, but getting that point of transition right is critical. And we had been successful, and other officers may know more detail than me, had been successful at securing some funding to put in place our district direct service, which obviously is very successful and based at the acute trusts around the county. Similar principle of service into Helsden, with a view to sort of working on some of that discharge aspect, which that isn't the total answer to the question you may have been alluding to, Councillor, but you know, it gives you an indication that we're constantly looking at opportunities to work in partnership with NSFT and other mental health providers. I've got a suspicion that Mike and Sarah might have more to add, so I'll shut up and let them have a say as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so thank you, Chairman. Just to say that we've been working quite closely with adult community mental health, and over this crisis, on an informal working group to try and bring them on board and really understand where their issues are and how we can support, and particularly linking in NSFT with CGL, so drug and alcohol and substance misuse, which obviously a key factor, and they're very much linked between the two as well. So we've been working with the last.
Do you want to tell everyone what CGL is, Mike?
Sorry. Change, grow, live. I knew I'd find it. Change, grow, live.
Well done.
They're you deal with acronyms so many times, but Change, grow, live have the contract for adult substance misuse in Norfolk, and so we've been working with them, and it's been a good relationship, and we're building on it. there is a lot of need out there, and one of the things that we're going to work on together is about how do we understand what that need will be in the future. Particularly, I think, bringing it back to a wellbeing panel for the District Council. A lot of wellbeing issues and mental health issues are practical based. So if you can sort out things like debt, you can sort the housing out, sort that kind of basic element out, then then obviously you can deal with more of the complex issues. So it's an emergent relationship, but certainly it's one we want to build on.
Lovely, thank you guys.
Okay. Lovely, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I know we're doing a lot of work in that area, aren't we? So no, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so yeah, is that okay, Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good update. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, great stuff. Okay, anyone else got any other matters arising, or should we move on? No, I'll take it as a no. Okay, so which is the alignment of mandatory licensable housing multiple occupation fees across the two councils, and Louise Simmons, Housing and Health Manager, is going to present this to us, and then obviously we can ask questions. Okay, I'll hand it over to Louise.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I should start by just introducing myself really. My name's Louise Simmons. I'm the Housing and Health Manager across Broadland and South Norfolk councils. So this report goes through, it proposes a single HMO, house in multiple occupation licence fee across both councils. The Housing Standards team has really sort of embraced the one team working approach, and with everything that's sort of been uncontrollable going on around us, we have stuck to focused control on what we want to achieve here. And we've really got stuck into moving forward with the HMO, housing multiple occupation agenda. So what we've already achieved here, we've put in place a one team housing multiple occupation inspection form. We've done a lot of work in standardising letters across both councils. We've got a one team licence, which we've produced and submitted on 4 or 5 occasions now since lockdown. And we've got standardised licence conditions and one team HMO facility and amenity guidance across both councils. So we've really moved forward with it. And the next stage really is with this proposal, which is to introduce the single HMO licence fee. So if I give you a very brief overview of what a house and multiple occupation, or HMO, actually is, the standard definition is for a property which houses 3 or more persons forming more than one household. So to give you a quick example, an HMO would be, for example, 3 work colleagues from Broadland District Council renting a room, separate rooms in one single property. Not related, completely unrelated, but they happen to share a house in which they live. What wouldn't be an HMO would be a single family unit for example, any combination of parents with children, grandparents living in annexes, for example. It's a single household, it's a single family unit occupying one property. So that's what the standard definition of a house and multiple occupation, or I'll just call them HMOs from now on, is. In October 2018, 1st of October 2018, new licensing, HMO licensing legislation came into place, which meant that larger HMOs, and a larger HMO is a property where you've got 5 or more people occupying a property which forms more than one household. So where you've got 5 occupants now, those properties would actually have to have a licence to be run as an HMO. So since sort of 2018, I've been working in the housing team at Broadland for a few years now, and have inspected all of the licensed HMOs throughout Broadland, and was responsible for bringing in the licensing regime at Broadland. So prior to the 1st of October 2018, the only houses in multiple occupation which needed to have a licence were those larger ones where they were 3 or more stories. So prior to 2018, we had 1 property in Broadland which needed to have a licence. that licence fee was determined by the fees and charges currently in place at that time, which I believe were introduced in 2015. Since then, obviously, we've had new legislation which came in the October 2018, which has meant it has meant changes to the licensing regime in that we do more detailed checks. It brought in requirements for minimum room sizes for sleep and accommodation, for example. So inspections now involve taking detailed measurements of room sizes. We do checks on fit and proper persons to see whether they're suitable to manage such properties. And we also do stricter checks on the amenities and facilities to determine whether they're suitable for the number of occupants and they're not overcrowded, for example. So there's a lot more checks. We ask for a lot more documentation in relation to electrical safety, fire safety, energy performance certification. So there's a lot more detail and involvement with that. And so with this new licensing fee, we've reflected that. And what I've actually done, if you've got the report in front of you, if I refer you to Appendix A, what I have actually done here, as myself and other officers responsible for issuing licenses, and those would be what are currently now community enforcement officers, so which was equivalent to what was an environmental health officer prior to January 2020, which is what I was. And we've sat down and we've worked out the exact procedure involved in licensing an HMO. So what we did is I sat with the other officers responsible for licensing, and we had the Broadland procedure and we had the South Norfolk procedure in front of us. We took out any areas of work which we didn't do, and we made sure that every single procedure that we currently do, which currently reflects how we would produce and submit that license, is within that procedure. So we've combined the procedures, make sure everything is in there. And so what you can see in Appendix A is a step-by-step procedure of how we've got to that license fee. So we've got the steps, and then we've got, we worked out how much time we would spend on each of those steps, and then we calculated that, totaled that. So the total procedure, if I now refer you to the table in 4.2, so the current proposed licence fee is £825, which we propose to apply as a flat rate fee across both councils. If you refer to the table in 4.2, Broadland fees are currently £593 as a flat rate fee. That's for 5 occupants. If any occupants over 5, it's an additional £28.50 per occupancy. So I've had a look, we've currently in Broadland, we've got 13, we've got 12 licensed HMOs currently. We've got another 2 going through, one which was just about to be issued any moment now. So this is since lockdown. So I've looked at the figures, and on average, the minimum obviously is 5 occupants, but it goes up to 14. So for a property where you've got 14 occupants, the fee would therefore be £849.50, for example. So it really, at Broadland, it depends on the number of occupants over 5, which that fee can go up. At South Norfolk, the current fee is £853. So there is a difference. Also, sticking to that table for now, the variation fee. So a variation would be, for example, an HMO owner landlord wanted to increase the number of sleeping accommodation rooms. So if they had an extension, or if they wanted to change the layout to a property. So a variation to the licence, we've actually refigured that and calculated that it would cost approximately 3 hours of community enforcement officer time. So we've calculated that to be £133. So previously, currently it is in Broadland, it's £28.50, and in South Norfolk, that's £49. So that fee has gone up for both. But we believe we've followed, again, if I refer you to Appendix B, we've gone through that exact same procedure whereby we worked out the variation fee and renewal fee for licenses as well. We've done that step by step, and we've worked out what is involved, and we believe, or I'm confident, that that fee is reasonable, proportionate, and it accurately reflects what we do in practice to issue that license. So the license lasts for a 5-year period, and at the end of that 5 years, the renewal fee that we're proposing is £514.30, and Appendix B shows you the calculation where we arrived at that figure. I put in Appendix C just as a comparison some of the licence fees which other local authorities charge throughout Norfolk, and also further beyond where they are major sort of licensing HMO cities, university towns, for example. So if we sort of quickly go through that now, what the fee that we're proposing in comparison to Broadland, they charge £399 for a 5-year licence. North Norfolk charge, they've got a similar sort of setup to Broadland, and they charge £525 for up to 6 units, and then an additional charge per occupancy over that number. Kings Lynn and West Norfolk charge £685, Great Yarmouth £770. The Norwich City one is a little bit of an anomaly there, because they actually issue a 1-year HMO licence as opposed to a 5-year licence. So their fee is £140 for a 1-year licence, which over 5 years would equate to £750. So I think the fee fits in there. I mean, it's slightly, obviously you can see for yourself, it's slightly higher than some of the other local authorities throughout Norfolk. But as I've said, I am confident we have sat down and worked the procedure out to a T, and at that which is included in the appendices in front of you. I mean, the only other thing to sort of say about the overall HMO licence fee, the time spent to produce that, I've calculated that. If you look, it's 1,110 minutes. That's actually 18.5 hours, which is, I believe that's a reasonable time period and reflects the time that we actually do put in. And the renewal procedure there is 11.5 hours. So to an actual licence holder, the fee, the proposed £825 fee, how I always approach it with landlords who are applying for a licence is try not to look at the fee in total, try and break it down over that 5-year period. So if it's easier to accept, if you split that £825 down into a yearly fee over the 5-year period, the actual annual cost there is £165 per year. We're offering the opportunity for landlords to pay in instalments as well, so that makes things a little bit easier. The other key thing that I would really like to stress is this case law, this really important case law. If I quickly try and share my screen with you. Can you see this? Can you see the?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're able to. So this. No, okay. Well, I'll quickly run through what it is. I mean, I was trying to show a page from the National Landlords Association website, which refers to really important case law concerning Westminster City Council and Hemmings, which was a commercially licensed property in the Westminster borough, where they were actually being charged approximately £29,000 per year for a license, as a license fee. And the argument there was that Westminster City Council were overcharging. And the outcome of that case, which is, as I said, a very high profile case, it's all over the National Landlords and Eastern Landlords Association websites. They're very much aware of this case law ruling. The outcome was that actually Westminster City Council were overcharging. They were charging for setup operational costs and enforcement costs in operating the licensing and enforcement procedure across Westminster Council. So I've really closely considered that case law when I've put these fees together. It's really important that, but judging that case law, the fees have to be accurate, reasonable, proportionate, and they have, most importantly, they have to accurately reflect the cost in issuing that license. It can't include setup costs and the day-to-day enforcement costs of enforcing licensing conditions throughout the districts of Broadland and South Norfolk, for example. It can only relate to the cost of issuing that license in relation to that specific property and any monitoring and enforcement of the license conditions in relation to that property, nothing else. Local authorities can't make a profit, and I've been very much aware of that. I mean, as my background as an inspecting officer, I do really appreciate how important this form of housing is a really essential low-cost form of housing for a lot of vulnerable people in our districts. And having inspected them, I've seen for myself the sort of people who occupy these properties. So a lot of them, it's their first opportunity to get on the property ladder. Others are extremely vulnerable. Others are from broken homes where they're in a position where they've unfortunately find themselves having to pay for 2 households, which is extremely difficult. So this form of housing is really critical. And the last thing I would want to see is for a license fee for a landlord to pass that fee on to tenants and raise rents and have other consequences. So again, I've considered all of that when we've put this license fee together, and I do truly believe that the fee that is proposed, the most important thing is that it reflects what we do in practice. I think if you compare it to other local authorities throughout Norfolk, I mean, our fees are based on up-to-date, accurate community enforcement officer rates, hourly rates, which I've obtained from our finance revenue team, and they're bang up to date and reflect the officer costs for the officer involved that would issue the license, a community enforcement officer. So that's the proposal, and I really do hope that it is accepted. The risk is if, I mean, as I said, we have fully embraced this one team approach, and this is the next step to achieve where we really want to get to. And the risk is if we don't go with this single fee, we need, as the case law demonstrates, your fee needs to accurately reflect how the costs involved in issuing the license. And as we are one team on one single pay scale, it's the same officers doing the work and issuing the license. There is a risk that if we don't go with a single team fee, that one or both councils could be accused of unfairly setting HMO license fees. And I'd really hate that to happen, because I do truly believe they are accurate, proportional and fair fees. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Louise. Thank you. Hopefully, with the papers in front of people, they've got a good understanding of what HMO is and why we need to go to have fees the same for both councils. If I go to questions now, I've got some questions myself, but if I put it to the floor, I did see Councillor Shaw had his hand up, so I don't know if that was to ask a question or whether it was by
Yes,
mistake,
it is actually.
Please ask your question, Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, well, it's various questions. I'll try and roll them into one, though. Looking at that table on 4.2, South Norfolk's going to get away with it, basically, whereas we're going to have a huge increase. I don't see why we need to be the same, quite honestly. We never have been before, and just because we're doing work with them doesn't mean we have to be the same. Also, this is definitely going to increase rents. That's definite. because the landlords are in business for themselves and they will pass it on. It's as simple as that. I don't like it, quite honestly. I think this is far too high for considering what we have been charging in the past. Far too high.
Okay, I mean, in response to that, the key thing that I would like to say really is the Broadland fee. That's a minimum for where you've got 5 occupants. So the majority of properties that I've been licensing in Broadland, they've typically been 7, 8 occupants, and the maximum we've got is up to 14. So that's the bare minimum, that £593 of what the license fee would be, but it's anything up from that depending on the number of occupants. I do appreciate what you're saying. I mean, I can only say that we've sat down really carefully and worked out the procedure involved in issuing the licenses, and calculated how much that time-wise that costs, and the fee accurate. I mean, we did the procedure, we did the time, and then we totaled that, and that came up with that fee, with no preconceived ideas or costs in our mind. South Norfolk Council have charged approximately £850, say, for a substantial period of time. I have asked, I mean, I've only started working, sort of covering the South Norfolk area since January, and I have asked whether that fee has caused any issues or complaints or any representations at all, and there hasn't been. I always try and approach the license fee issue as gently as I can. As I said, each year that the proposed fee equates to £165 per year. You're looking at a property where there's always going to be a minimum of 5 persons, and if you think about the monthly rental income from a minimum of 5 persons, it will soon cover that annual £165 fee. I know there were other costs associated with operating and running an HMO, but in comparison to the rental income that they will get over a 12-month period, the £165, it doesn't sound as bad.
No, I can understand it when you put it like that, but it's still going to cause the landlords to increase the rents. It will. It's as simple as that. Because if you're in business, you pass on costs. You don't just leave it and say, oh, well, I'll pay for that. These are things that actual tenants will have to pay for. And when they see the huge increase, and it is a huge increase in comparison to South Norfolk, they're not going to be happy with it. And I don't blame them, quite honestly.
Okay. Thanks for your comments, Councillor Shaw. Right, so we've got Councillor Lawn, followed by Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Crotch. So, Councillor Lawn.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that presentation, Louise. That's excellent, and the paperwork that we've received is very informative. I don't have an issue with the cost of the licence. I'd like to think that we could put something in place that the landlord wasn't able to increase the rents over a period of time before, to justify the increase. But my only concern is that it says that we can't make a surplus. So how is Broadland justified? I totally understand, you've written out the format and the cost, the hourly cost and how many hours it works out to. But how are we justifying ourselves as Broadland Council by taking it up by £232, where South Norfolk are reducing theirs? Is there something that we weren't doing over the past that we're now bringing into place? Am I making sense?
Yeah, complete sense. I mean, the difference between the jump from the licensing fee, which was previously in place, was introduced in around 2015 when there was just one licensable property because it was 3 or more stories. Since then, as I said, the legislation came in which brought in stricter controls and requirements for HMO landlords, and we are doing there is increased procedure, there is increase in time and asking and checking paperwork, and inspections are taking longer than they did previously, because the licence conditions specify a maximum number of occupants based upon there are minimum bedroom sleeping accommodation sizes. So we have to check and each room size, do the measurements, and we have to determine the maximum number of occupants that can occupy each property. So there are more checks. And so I think the increase in cost has purely come about as a result of the different procedures involved, but the previous fees related to a different procedure, really, because it didn't reflect the new licensing procedure which came in 2018.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask one more, Mr. Chairman? So do we have any interim checks? Do we have any checks in between the 5 years to check that the landlords aren't putting more people into the rooms or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because that sort of brings me on to another point, really. Where we really want to go with our sort of one team HMO procedure in Broadland, we're a little bit ahead, really, and that we have a routine inspection programme of all of our HMOs, whether they're licensed or not. But the licensed ones, we make a point, we risk assess them. And that risk assessment after each inspection determines the frequency of our visits. And most often or not, the majority of our licensed properties are inspected annually. I have been going around annually. And where we've identified, there have been properties where we've identified that they need to reduce the number of occupancies, and we've given them a time period to do that, and we do go back and check on that. So we do check on the licence conditions. And again, doing that adds to the enforcement costs, which we can charge for against that particular property as part of the procedure. So yeah, we do, but look at moving forward, we want to bring in a proactive inspection programme across both, and make sure we do get this these annual inspections going. We're certainly doing more proactive inspections with joint inspections with the police and fire service already, particularly in relation to modern day slavery and immigration issues. So these are the key areas that we really want to focus on. And the other thing to sort of say is that if we, during lockdown, we've had officers working on identifying properties where there's 5 or more people. So we're actively looking now we're aware that not all of these properties are licensed where they should be. And actually, if we identify properties where they haven't applied for a license and they should have done, it could actually result in enforcement action, which potentially could be a civil penalty, where the council could, following enforcement procedures, potentially claim up to £30,000 for a property not having a license. So all of these things we want to bring in. What we're trying to do is do it in a staged approach. So as I said, I believe we've got the paperwork ready to go. We just need this single license fee, and then we can get our procedures, be more proactive across both districts and really get this up and running. But to be able to do this consistently across both districts, I truly believe we've got the same workforce, we've got the same officers going in, being paid the same rate. I find it would be extremely difficult now to charge different rates in each of the local authority areas, because how could we justify a difference in fees now? Because it's the same people using the same process and the same amount of time. So I truly believe this is the right, proportionate, reasonable way to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Louise, for the presentation, what you put together there. It's really informative, actually. Thank you. I find myself in a peculiar position of agreeing with Councillor Nigel Shaw in that it is quite an increase. It's almost like a triple hit with the licence, the variations, and then the renewal as well. I absolutely buy your argument of, it's hard to justify having different fees across 2 districts, but does it need to be as high an increase as it's illustrated there at the moment? I mean, I'm in agreement again with Nigel that that the landlords will most likely pass it on to the tenants.
I do see where you're coming from, and as I said, I do have that fear, being an inspecting officer myself. That's the last thing I want to see happen, because of what it provides for our community. But I can't, as with the case, the reason I brought up the case law is because it's really important that the licence fee accurately reflects the procedure involved in issuing the licence. And the Annex A, Appendix A and Appendix B shows the step-by-step process that we did really carefully consider. That is the process of how we issue a licence. That is the amount of time we spend preparing that licence to issue it. And that reflects what we do in practice.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, Louise. Is there anything else you'd ask to ask Councillor Thomas? No.
I suppose I'm going to suggest, are we putting this to the vote today, Chair, or anything?
If we get a proposal and a second different recommendation, yes, or a different recommendation, who knows? Okay, thank you, Councillor Crotch.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, again, good presentation. Thank you, Louise. And I think you're right. It's really important that these type of HMOs are licensed to make sure that the conditions for people living in them is right. So it's a really important thing to have in place. I guess for me, just a couple of points for clarity. One was really, assuming we had the fee previously, was that fee for Broadland qualified in a similar manner to this? So was it, when it was set in 2015, was it set against a similar set of parameters? The follow-up to that really is in respect of the number of hours spent on it and comparing it to other councils, looking at the schedule in Appendix C of other councils' fees, assuming that other councils have undertaken a similar sort of time and motion study that you've undertaken for Broadland and South Norfolk, it would appear that other councils are doing this more efficiently, in the sense that their fees are less. And when I look at some of the time spent, sort of 30 minutes to put an application form out in the post, have we overinflated the number of hours spent? Because again, forgive me, as a layman, 18.5 hours sounds an awful long time overall. And when I look at some of the breakdowns of it, it seems sort of quite inflated to me. So just sort of a justification for our time spent compared maybe to other councils and the efficiency, and are we sort of overcharging by overinflating the hours spent?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the first point that you raised, the previous licence fee at Broadland, which was set around about 2015, my understanding is that the Housing Standards Senior Manager, Kevin Philcox, did go through a process of calculating that fee. But as I've said, that it related to a different procedure. The new legislation in 2018 brought out the mandatory licensing requirements, and it did bring with it more checks, more requirements, more procedures. So it does; those fees do relate to different procedures. There's a lot more we have to do now when we're issuing a license. With regards to the actual breakdown, I mean, what we did is I sat down with officers involved in issuing the licenses, and we really carefully considered what is a reasonable period of time to what we would typically spend on doing that activity. And when we say the 30 minutes for an application form, for example, that would be getting all the necessary paperwork together, making sure it's being addressed to the right people, because it's not just anybody involved in the property. We have to look at who else, checking all land registry details, and all of that breakdown. What we do, I think we've been as accurate as we possibly can. The last thing I want to, I mean, I need to be personally be able to be prepared to stand up a property tribunal or court of law and be able to justify these fees. And I'm happy with what's in that appendix.
Thanks. Okay, thanks, Louise. Mike wanted to come in. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to add to Louise's points, one of the things that I challenge the team, and we worked together on to start with, is I work quite closely with on county lines and modern day slavery and that type of agenda. And whilst all HMOs aren't hotbeds of crime, there is certainly an element of which Louise brought up at the start about vulnerability. So one of the things that I was really keen that we look at is, can we make sure that we have a really good, strong application process, a review process, and a regular inspection process for HMOs? Because if we can help to drive out areas like modern day slavery, county lines, and that's got to be a good thing for Broadland Council. And by having a good, strong regime, we can do that. And I guess, and then the other point is if we do, when we look at some of our other councils, I'm not sure that they've taken it as seriously as we do, and certainly that we know that some councils haven't refreshed their costs for quite a while. Whereas we've obviously recently done there, so it may well be that others form up. So, so as I say, I think if we can have a good, robust process here to make sure that we are supporting our vulnerable residents, and absolutely, Councillor Shaw's point is valid. We need to look at we need to balance the cost of the council compared to the cost of the landlord. But thinking that actually, I think we've got this in a reasonably good position. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah. So obviously there is an argument that you could put more hours in there for checks, and
yeah,
potentially.
I'd like to think we've been, as I say, I'll be happy to stand up before a property tribunal and justify those costs. I mean, there are always variations, but I mean, I can think of circumstances where, for example, the initial inquiry, I've spent up to 45 minutes, anything from 45 minutes to an hour, talking through, I've given advice and guidance, and we do try and do that. We do try and help our landlords and advise, and we're not all strict enforcement. We try and encourage them, and I actively encourage people to go for more sleeping accommodation rooms, because potentially to make the most out of rental income for them, but also to provide the most affordable accommodation for more people. So I mean, we do try and help the landlords and advise and encourage them as much as possible. The last thing I want to do is increase rents, but I don't think £165 per year is unreasonable, considering the potential rental income that they could get.
I agree. It's not a great deal of money. I wanted to ask a couple of questions, please. On the appendices, you cost out the officers at £44.46 an hour.
Yes.
How did you get to that figure?
Well, I went to our revenues budget finance team, and Jennifer Nichols provided us with an hourly cost for a community enforcement officer. That hourly cost reflects officer on costs as well, so it also includes national insurance, pension, and on costs across the council, which all reflect costs involved in operating our service.
I do understand that. I completely understand that. But if you work out that hourly amount, that's saying that this officer is costing us £85,500 per year. Can you explain that to me? Because I find that very difficult to grasp.
Yeah, I mean, these figures were, as I said, obtained from our finance team, and they were. I made sure I obtained them as close as possible to when I worked out, immediately before I worked out the procedure and the cost. So this is what's been provided by, and I've been assured that they are correct. I've checked and double checked, and they accurately reflect the hourly cost of a community enforcement officer.
Okay. Well, if you Louise, if you take that back, if I mean, the conversation I had with Mike actually was saying it was approximately 28% put on for on costs. Okay, so if we strip that out, you're still talking about a community enforcement officer costing us £66,828 per year. I can't equate that. I find that difficult to grasp.
And what we've done, Chairman, is
explain it to me.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And we've had a look at that. We've taken a commercial approach to this as well, and had a look at if we were going to do this in a commercial environment, and one of the clear steers we had from both councils is we need to get more efficient and we need to be more.
No, I 100% agree with that. Yeah.
And so that cost, what we've done is we've taken a cost that would look like a a professional organisation giving advice. So you would be bringing in the whole cost of that team, from travel, from computer for expenditures, and admin and paperwork and all that type of stuff. So certainly that £44.46 is not the actual officer cost in any shape or form. It's the officer cost plus all the extra costs that go into making that license happen.
Right. It still seems extremely high to me.
Yeah,
I must be honest.
It's an overall cost of for what Jennifer Nichols in finance explained it. How she explained it to me was it includes all on costs, accommodation costs, all the costs to the council involved in operating that service, and she's then broken it down to 2.7 full-time equivalent community enforcement officers to get it as accurately as possible to reflect the hourly cost of that. So she's based it on a 2.7 full-time equivalent over like the 37-hour week, the 52 weeks a year, and that to 44, 46. I've got a table with the breakdown of figures if you would.
That would be really helpful, I think. Yeah, thank you.
You've got that in your inbox, Councillor Wymark.
Have I?
Yeah.
Okay.
I sent it to you this afternoon. That's fine. That's fine. You may not have seen it yet, but yeah.
No, I haven't. No.
It's a point of certainly we'll take that on board, and obviously have a look at that in your inbox. Then then between now and cabinet, obviously we can discuss that.
Okay. I've got a question from Councillor Folger. Councillor Folger, would you like to ask your question? And then Councillor Long would like to come back. Councillor Folger?
It's on mute. You're on mute.
Councillor Folger, do you want to unmute yourself?
I'm trying to unmute him, but he doesn't seem to.
Well, what we'll do then, if we go to Councillor Lawn and then we'll come back to Councillor Folger. Councillor Lawn, are you there?
Okay, thank you. I've just as we've been sitting here, I'd seen the figures earlier, but I hadn't broken it down as before now. But am I right in thinking, Louise, I don't know whether you've broken the figures down to weekly amounts. I've got the increase, it would be for the landlord, it would be £3.17 a week.
I haven't been to it. I broke it down to what it would be for them to cost them for the year, but I haven't done per week.
Well, I've got it that it's £3.17 a week, and then if it's a household of 5 residents or 5 rooms, that's 63 pence per resident.
You're right, Councillor.
Am I a million miles out there?
No, you're right. I just worked it out. You're right.
Thanks.
Yeah. So when you put it into that kind of calculation, I appreciate that it's still. I just wish there was some way that we could say to the landlord, you cannot pass this fee on. We have to be justified in not making a profit out of this. So Absolutely. It would be good if there was some way that we could then pass that on to the landlord and say you cannot calculate this in your rent. But really, £3.17 a week. The landlord should be able to cover that cost. He should not be able to pass that on to the tenant. And £3.17 a week for the rent that they would be bringing in, I don't think is a huge amount. And again, Louise, you've got to, as you've said, you would have to stand up if anybody was to appeal it and say this is our justification. So I'm having confidence in the team that you have gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, and that you do, there is total justification in what you're putting forward.
Yeah, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. I mean, I am confident, and I would be happy to stand up and justify those costs, because we've put a lot of thought in consideration. We've got the same concerns as you all have regarding the rent, but as I said, we've all sort of discussed it. you break that down, and when you break it down per weekly cost, that's even better, really. I appreciate it. It is an increase, but it reflects the costs involved in providing the service, and they're justifiable, reasonable, and that's why they're proposed.
Thanks.
I'm more than happy during the license issuing process to speak to landlords and do all we can to encourage them not to pass on the fee, because I don't want that to happen either. We don't have any control over what, I mean, the landlord could put their rental fees up at any time for any reason. It's more likely to cover insurance costs, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we're more than happy to do all we can to try and discourage that from being passed on to tenants.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, thanks. Also, Councillor, I think you make a fair point there, and I think the earlier on in the presentation, Louise, you were being very clear that actually some of our HMOs would be paying more than we're suggesting currently because of the add-on fees. So I think you've got to look at it in the round. I mean, I know I'm being a bit, critical here, but obviously I've got Mike's figures in front of me now, so I can actually see them. But for me, that I needed to get that clear in my mind. But you've clarified it yourself that you're happy to stand up in court if necessary, and for me, that gives me a great deal of confidence that we're doing the right thing. I mean, I would question if our fees were maybe, who knows if they were right before, but that's irrelevant actually in many ways. With the one team, they've got to be right so we can justify ourselves.
Yeah, I think thank you. I think the best thing to do is try not to focus too much on that, the previous fee. I know it's easy to say, but it really does reflect a different time and a different procedure.
No, absolutely.
Legislation brought in new procedures, and this really brings everything really up to date, and it accurately reflects what we do.
Okay, no, that's fine with me. Thank you very much. Councillor Folger, are you able to join us?
I hope so.
Oh, excellent. Great thinking. You have a question, yeah. Thank you.
Right, yes. Basically, as has been mentioned before, Kevin Philcox did a lot of work on behalf of Broadland for this with the original licensing situation under previous legislation, etc. And clearly, what is being proposed does represent a large increase for Broadland residents, and one has to bear in mind here that the situation is that we are, despite having one team, we are still two sovereign councils, and we are not obliged to charge the same amount as South Norfolk, and neither are they in reverse obliged to do what we would do in certain circumstances. So I think clearly those points should be borne in mind, and I have a great deal of sympathy with the comments made by Councillor Shaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I do fully understand, and I accept that. The only difficulty I would have with charging two separate fees is which one do I stand up before a property tribunal and justify as accurate? Because it's the same team providing the same service, the same procedure, one of which would have to be wrong.
You could never justify that, could you?
I'd be comfortable saying that the breakdown in Appendix A accurately reflects what we do, but I wouldn't be comfortable charging two separate. I wouldn't know what to say as to which one is right.
Well,
both can't be right.
We simply couldn't charge now unless we split the roll up. We simply couldn't charge a different amount because, as Louise said, we would be up in court for one or the other.
Yeah.
It's about making defensible decisions, isn't it, legally?
Yeah.
And if it's not defensible, then you're in a bit of a difficult place, really. Okay, thank you very much. Right, I've got Councillor Hartley and then Councillor Shaw. Okay, Councillor Hartley. Councillor Hartley, would you like to ask a question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Right,
yes.
I'm no friend to private landlords, as you may well have guessed, but I'm finding it really difficult to justify such a big jump. When you break it down, it sounds really reasonable, and you think £3 a week or whatever it is, it doesn't sound like much. But it's the leave. I understand it's a different process now, but it seems we're only doing it just so we can tie in with South Norfolk, and I don't think that's a good enough reason, to be quite honest. Just so we're on the same team, if you like. I just can't justify that. It's really uncomfortable with me. I actually think it's a really good example of why the two councils, one team approach isn't always the best thing for us or for them. Sorry, I just don't agree with it.
No, I do see your point, but that truly isn't. I mean, there's no agenda other than to work out how much the cost this service is going to be costing. I mean, I couldn't. If we were to do it two separate ways, as I said, this would be the way we issue the license, and this is the cost. What it was before doesn't reflect what we do now.
I understand that. I do know it's a different service, but it just does not sit comfortably with me. And I hear what you're saying, and of course, if it's going to help enforce modern slavery, who would be against that? No one would be against you having the means to be able to make sure these are properly licensed. But that big leap, which is mainly to justify the two councils, one team approach, it does not sit comfortably with me. And I just don't agree with it. No matter how much you try and explain to me, which I do agree with all the individual points, it's the bigger picture. It just doesn't sit comfortably with me. Sorry.
Mike,
Chair, might I respond to that, please?
And also Jamie, actually. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Sorry, do you mind if I go first, Mike? I mean, just listening to the conversation, I've not been terribly involved in this piece of work. I think what I've heard loud and clear is that the starting point for this has been looking at the process we have to follow and the consequential costs of the service to enforce that process. The starting point hasn't been what Broadland have charged in the past or what South Norfolk have charged in the past. I think, and I will stand up in terms of the integrity of my officers in this regard, have tried to present to you a really transparent perspective of what we think is an honest account of cost. Of course, it's completely within your jurisdiction, in terms of setting policy as to the rationale as to what you want the answer to be. I just reinforced Louise's point of view that we can't knowingly set different rates because it is the same team and the same process. But the starting point for this, I just want to repeat and kind of quash that line of inquiry, has not been to align both councils for any other reason than there is no justification not to have the same cost because it is only one team providing the service. So we're going around in circles to some degree, and I'm only really trying to reinforce the point that Louise is making. But I just want to make that point because I want to represent the integrity within which this piece of work has been done, and it is just an honest representation to you this evening. There, as Louise has quite rightly said, there's no other agenda here. It's the lever for the piece of work has been bringing the teams together, causing a relook at the cost of the service in light of the case law, and that's what I've heard loud and clear. But please don't be misinformed that this is coming from the point of view of the starting point of either South Norfolk or Broadland. And in some respects, I wish we hadn't put those figures in the paper because they're actually pretty immaterial to the conversation.
Thanks, Jamie. I mean, being completely open and honest about this, how we went about this was I sat down with the other community enforcement officers involved in licensing, and we wrote down the procedure. That's how it started. We wrote out our procedure, and it went from there. And we had no idea what the proposal fee would be until we got right to the very end of the process, and added up the officer time, and then went to revenues and got the hourly costs. We didn't know what that would be in advance, so it was purely led by the procedure, because that was key. Following as I said, the case law that I highlighted, it was key in my mind that it had to be all about the actual current procedure.
Yeah, and I accept that, Louise. I mean, I know that's a conversation I've had with Mike before and Kevin as well, actually. So I totally accept that. Mike, did you want to add something before I move on to Councillor Shaw?
I was going to say exactly what Jamie was going to say. So
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shaw, you wanted to speak again?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I was looking at Appendix C, and you did mention Westminster Council. You can't compare us to Westminster. They're ridiculous for a start off. They're responsible for the Grenfell disaster as well. Not literally them personally, but to do with whatever they did. Now, the only thing is on this Appendix C, most of the councils listed are big city councils, which you expect to be a lot more expensive. Once again, I think you've missed out on sort of putting councils in here which compare to us. Okay, you've got Broadland, you've got North Norfolk, fair enough. You can't compare Kings Lynn, Great Yarmouth, Norwich City, all the rest of them down here, because they are big city councils. So that's a misnomer for a start off. What I would like to know, I'm sure you have the figure there, is what would the percentage increase be? Because that's the figure that the newspapers are going to quote.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to the comparison, I tried to pick, because a lot of, we're bordering Norwich City, obviously, we've got the university, we've got the UEA, and there is a lot of student accommodation. So I tried to pick similar university towns, cities. I could have gone on forever. But as you can see, I mean, some of these fees are a lot higher than what we're proposing here. Now, I mean, we've got a lot more sort of going on than sort of Kings Lynn, really. So I do think that our fee is, I mean, it's not that far apart because they start at 685 and then build up on that per additional occupancy if you look at the figure there. So their figure has the potential to go up just as high or even higher, depending on how large the property and the occupancy. With regards to the percentage increase, I mean, clearly I have worked out what the difference would be and what it would mean to both councils. It's £260 difference between the two councils from what they currently are. But as I said, the Broadland fee in particular was set back in 2015 and related to a different procedure, a procedure which was changed because of legislation and new requirements that have been brought in, and there are increased procedures and checks involved.
But it would be nice to know the percentage, because that's the figure that people are going to be asking about when they read it in the newspapers, and it's most certainly will be reported in the newspapers.
We can certainly put the percentage when this also goes to cabinet, and we can work that out.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Long. Councillor Shaw, even. Sorry. What I was going to say, Louise, is obviously you've spoken about some of the other properties that are HMOs currently. Most of them have got over 5 occupants, and obviously some would cost more than this now. I mean, it would be useful, perhaps, going forward, if we got an idea of the average cost now, and obviously reflect that, because
I've got some information that I've just very quickly checked today. I mean, the majority, the highest occupancy we've got is 14, where the cost would be £849.50. So it all depends. On average, I would say the majority of licenses that I've issued, the occupancy is 7 or 8 occupants. That's the average. And so that would, the average £678.50 for the average number of license fee that.
So you'd be talking around about £650 then, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Roughly, as things stand at the moment, and obviously the variation. I mean, I must be honest. I thought it was quite a derisory amount we're charging at the moment. Bearing in mind it's 3 hours of officer time. It's ridiculous to charge someone £28.50, frankly. So I think that we've been undercharging probably by the looks of it. Jamie's made a couple of interesting points here, and I think he's fair points really. Because obviously in city centres, it may be cheaper to actually, you know, do the service, as he said, purely in terms of travel. And also, Jamie's saying is about a 25% increase, 5% increase per year, as you said. So if you cost it out over year on year, it's really not a great deal of money, and I totally accept that. I'll go back to Councillor Lawn now. She'd like to ask another question. Councillor Lawn, you there? I keep losing everyone's picture. I don't know if you're turning your pictures off. But
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Louise, are you saying that it's 650 currently on average?
Yes.
For a
Yes.
7-bed?
Yeah, if there's eight, the average is 8 occupants, and the total there would be £678.50.
So will that, so remind me what the variance is again. I'm sort of lost it. The variance isn't for, so the charge is for 5.
Yeah, so if
it's 133.
Yeah, if everyone refers to the table in 4.2, the fee
page 23.
Is £593 for 5 persons occupying the property. For every additional occupant over 5, there's an additional fee of £28.50.
But the new one was the new fee.
The new one is a flat rate fee, so it would be £825 regardless of the number of occupants. And
the 133?
The 133 is for a variation to the license. So once the license has been issued, if the landlord,
if he was to put an extension on or something,
vary. If they wanted to vary for whatever reason, then we've calculated there would be approximately a 3-hour officer time involved in dealing with that variation, which would include a visit. And then the renewal fee would be the fee charged after a 5-year period. So again, that was calculated with slightly reduced costs because we wouldn't have to do some of the checks that we have to do initially with regards to measuring rooms, because there's been a significant change.
Yeah, that's fine. And the other thing that I just in relation to what Councillor Shaw was saying, how we can't compare to other areas. Well, we can't really compare because what we put in is our costs. That's our justification. So it doesn't matter what Norwich City are charging or Westminster or anywhere else. As long as we're justified in the cost that you're saying that we need to charge, that's it. I don't see what the comparison is for. Okay, it's telling us what the other ones do. And as Mike said earlier, maybe the others might then look and assume that they need to relook at what they were doing before. Again, with our charges that we had as Broadland for the past 5 years, I'm assuming that we either didn't give a very good service and we're going to now improve that service, or we must have been losing big time on the cost. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to propose. I'd like to propose that we should go with this officer's recommendation, and I think that we, as long as everything that's in front of us is totally genuine, the costs are totally, as you're saying, we're not going to make a profit on it because we can't. I'd so love to see something that says that the landlord cannot justify in passing the costs on. But again, as Councillor Hartley said, I don't think that it's acceptable that private landlords should be having a low cost fee to make quite a lot of money out of houses of multiple occupation. I don't think that's acceptable either. So I think that with the license that we would be charging, I feel whenever you break it down to the daily costs, I think that we would be justified in doing this. So I'd like to propose we go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Long, for your proposal. I'll just go to Councillor Crotch. He wanted to come in on the increase as well. So I'll just go to him and then we'll move to a vote.
Yeah, forgive me. I think if we're comparing a straight numbers of 825 new fee and 593 existing fee, that's actually a 39% increase in basic numbers. Although I do take Jamie's point that if you then divide that by 5, it reduces it down per annum basis, but it's actually 39 is the differential figure. If I may, I know that was what I asked to come in on. If I may, with your indulgence, Chairman, just picking up on what Councillor Lawn's question was around the for example, the property inspections that are being done throughout the term, and I think if I understood this correctly from what Louise said, they are additional inspections that are done, but you factored it into the original thing. Has there been any consideration to making those one-off fees to effectively reduce the initial fee, and picking up on your point that if they're risk-based assessments, some of these, if you have a good house, then clearly you'll have less inspections, so you pay less fees in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you. I mean, we have considered options like that. I mean, if you, there are local authorities that charge less for a prompt payment, for example. But again, we have to it comes back to that case law where the fee has to reflect the cost of providing the service. So where there were incentives offered, I mean, that's something that we could potentially look at long term, but yeah, I mean, this reflects what we do in practice to issue the license as it stands.
I just thought it was a risk-based approach. It would be an encouragement to the HMO owner to get their house in order, so they would need less inspection is really why I was trying to drive up standards as well as reduce costs.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's something, Councillor Crotchig, and I mean, one of the questions that was brought up earlier about, I don't think it was the fact that Broadland was charging less or incorrectly charging years ago. We're kind of moving from a core funded service with the council that we provide services to more of a commercial element, and actually very much that thinking, if we are going to go down that commercial route, are there different charging mechanisms? So if you've got a good property, if you're going to charge, I think that is a very legitimate line of inquiry that we need to look at as a more commercial organisation in the future, because if we were in private business, that's what we would be doing, and you would have incentives and that type of stuff. So very much that line of inquiry is something we want to go as we go transformational. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So it is something we could investigate longer term. Yeah. Okay. I'm happy to second the recommendation, Councillor Lawn. So if has anyone else wish to speak, or shall we move to a vote? So recommendation as on page 24. At 8.1, this Cabinet is asked to consider and comment on proposals to set the new one-team council fees for mandatory licensable HMOs at £825 for a new 5-year licence, £133 for variations on an existing 5-year licence, and £514 for renewal of a 5-year licence. Okay, so we'll go to a vote then. Dawn, will you take the vote?
Yes, of course, Chairman. I'll do it on a roll call if that makes things easier for everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to confirm, obviously, that you're voting on what would effectively be a recommendation to Cabinet. Obviously, the Cabinet would be the decision making. Yes. Yeah. So can I start with Councillor Crotch, please?
4.
Councillor Folger? 8.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hartley.
Against.
Councillor Lawn.
4.
Councillor Prutton.
4.
Councillor Shaw. Councillor Shaw, could you indicate if you're for or against?
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas.
Against.
Thank you. 2, 3.
What now, Mum? What's this?
Chairman, that's 3 members voting for and 4 against, so that proposal is lost. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. Sorry, Chairman, I do apologise. I'm sorry, sorry, that was really remiss of me. I'll continue to do my roll call. I do apologise. Councillor Wymark, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Starling.
Against.
Thank you. I do apologise, Chairman. I'll just recalculate. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
So the vote's lost. 4 to 5.
That's 4 members for. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against. So that's lost, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. So
I don't know if anyone wants to put a counter proposal forward for Cabinet to consider.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah. Is anyone putting forward a counter proposal or not? They may not. You don't have to.
Not necessarily. No, I say the ultimate decision-making body would be Cabinet, and presumably the views of the Wellbeing panel going forward would be that it was a lack of support for the recommendation.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay.
Could I just ask something?
Yeah, please.
This is a point of routine, or what's going to happen next. Does this document go through ONS before it gets to Cabinet?
Yes. Yes, Chairman.
So it could be pulled around then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, ONS would be expected to look at this. I mean, any paper that goes on to Cabinet realistically goes through ONS. I think there's very few that don't.
Yeah.
So it could get further scrutiny.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just ask as well? So even though we're not recommending it as a Wellbeing panel, the Cabinet doesn't have to pay attention to us. Is that the case?
No, because we give a recommendation.
Yeah. So, but
we're
not recommending it.
Yeah.
So the Cabinet.
On balance here, it's been voted down, 4 votes to 5. So the recommendation of this panel is not to recommend the recommendation as such. But it's only a recommendation. We don't make decisions at the. So the decision making will be made subsequently. And as I say, Councillor Prutton made a really important point there that the overview and scrutiny could look at this and feel differently. They could feel the same. Who knows? So their recommendation to Cabinet could be different to ours. Okay, but thank you,
Chairman. I think Jamie Sutterby would like to raise a point.
Jamie, yeah, please, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess I'm looking for a steer as to what you would like to happen next, because I think we could do a number of things, and the complication really, as Louise has very articulately laid out, is that we're in an invidious position where we can't realistically defend having a different rate at the 2 councils. And normally I'd be the first to say that, of course, both councils are sovereign, have the ability to set their own rate, but given it's got to be defensible by way of transparency of the actual cost of the process, it leaves us in a really difficult position. And this is being discussed tomorrow by your counterparts in the policy committee at South Norfolk. So I think actually, with the chairman's discretion, I'd be keen to kind of know what the outcome of that discussion looks like before we maybe take stock. The things that we could do next. I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable, if I'm honest, with taking forward a recommendation to Cabinet that you are not supporting. I'd sooner be putting in front of you a recommendation you feel able to support. If you are comfortable though in putting forward a paper that you're not endorsing, what I don't really want to do is kind of waste time in going through a process to then have to regroup and start the process again. I therefore am kind of keen on a bit more of a steer of what you would find acceptable in endorsing, because a short conversation now might help with the kind of next steps of the process.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. For me, what I would say is that yes, I've asked difficult questions, and because I wasn't clear of the answers, and I think other people have too. But the bottom line for me is, I'll come to you, Councillor Lorne, in a second. Thank you. The bottom line for me is that the officers have told us very clearly what the legal steer is. As you say, we cannot make, every decision we make, or you make as well too, must be defensible. So Louise would have to go into court at some point, potentially, if challenged. Now, I take that as something I can feel assured by, which is why I was happy to second it and to support this recommendation. So that's where I come from. I'll hand over to you, Councillor Lorne.
Well, no, I totally agree with what you're saying. The only thing that I would question is, I don't know where we go to from here, because if you go back and you rewrite the figures, then somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you do that in the first place? If and I just don't know where we go to. I had something in my head and it's gone, because I just can't see that there's any way around this now, other than rewriting the whole thing and then not giving the service that I anticipated that we would give.
No, and I think that's a fair point, because I think, as you say, if we accept that the process is as been laid out to us, and if you accept that the costings are as laid out to us, then I think this is the right way to go forward, because we can't go back and say, well, actually, it's not going to cost this much. It's not going to be this many hours, because we've already set this out, and we've been very, very clear about that. So,
yeah. I mean, if I can just,
add
to that, I mean, the fear sort of moving forward from here would be, ultimately what we're saying now is me going back and having a look at the steps in Appendix A and trimming back some of the officer time involved, which ultimately is sort of saying that we want to undercharge, lose money potentially. I mean, I mean, from my point of view, this accurately reflects what we do. So
and I think that's the fair argument, really. Yeah.
To go down on that, you're potentially undercharging for a service, and that's not.
We can all go back and trim out time from the officers. We can all go out, and you could trim out something from the overall figure, but it would be inaccurate. Now, for me, it's about being accurate. Now, if it's accurate, it's accurate, and if you can stand by that, and as you say, you know, stand up in a witness box and argue that, then that gives me comfort. I'll be honest with you, Louise. All right, okay, so that's where I come from. I've got Councillor Hartley, then Councillor Prutton. Thank you, Councillor Hartley.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about going forward from here, because it's going to go to scrutiny anyway, and Cabinet are going to do what they want to do, regardless of what we recommend, just like quite a lot of our overview and scrutiny recommendations. They will do what they want to do. So it will get a good look over with even more people at ONS, people with a bit more expertise. Perhaps it might get tinkered with, but ultimately it's down to Cabinet and their agenda.
Okay, thank you for your point, Councillor Hartley. Mike, did you want to make a point?
Just a point, Chairman. Just a point, Chairman. I mean, one of the things, as I said, in terms of a commercial decisions and how we move forward, there is a cost to the council to run services, and one of the policies that members have to look at in the future. We have two full-time community enforcement officers. They do HMOs, they do empty homes, they will do gypsy and travellers, and you know, there's a cost. Where do we want to put that cost as an organisation? So I could absolutely cut out costs for HMOs. That means that we're going to put less of a service into HMOs, but that would mean we could put more into gypsy and travellers, or more into something else. So you know, that's the kind of thing we've got to a point where, you know, this is the cost of a service, and it depends really on how much members want, and the steer certainly from me, from officers, I want this to be a good service. HMOs and vulnerable residents, but obviously, you know, we will take into account.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Prutton.
Well, yes. On the basis of what Louise said about standing up in court, and she's got to justify herself one way or another, and she wants to have a single point of, you know, a single reference point. If they took out the basing the cost per hour on a community enforcement officer, surely we could have a South Norfolk rate, and we could have a Broadland rate. And if she's standing up in court, she might. The procedure's the same, the analysis is the same, the tasks to be undertaken are the same, but do they have to be at the same rate? Is that worth looking at?
I think for, I mean, I'll let Louise answer if she wants, but for me, because the officer team above the community enforcement officers are the same, so those costs are the same. Like, I mean, what Mike sent me, etc. Obviously, the office costs are the same, the IT costs are the same. So all those things will be roughly the same, above the community enforcement officer. So I would say probably, yeah, that the actual cost would come out, if not exactly the same, very, very close to. So
I think Chairman,
Louise, if you want to add anything to that, Mike, yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Pruden. I mean, that would be, we could obviously charge something different, because that would be that if we put less resource into checking HMOs and resourcing in Broadland, then obviously we'd charge less, and the consequence of that is people in HMOs are more at risk. So that's the balance that members need to make.
Okay, fair enough. It was just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we're going to come to a resolution this evening. We could be talking around this for some time. So I think we need to let it move on to ONS for them to look at, and Cabinet, and obviously if the officers have got any further arguments they feel they can add weight to this, then please do so. Sorry, Councillor Crotch, did you want to come in again?
I only really just wanted to come back to Mike's point about if we reduce the time on this, that clearly we have to remember that people who are in HMOs are quite often the vulnerable of society, and what we don't want to do is undermine, which is what Mike's point was, undermine the good work of monitoring these HMOs and making sure they are to a high standard. So the time is the time that the officers have calculated is the right amount of time to spend on this, and if we start cutting it, coming to Mike's point, we're just going to devalue the service and leave some of the vulnerable of society who are in HMOs even more vulnerable, because they've got some, unscrupulous landlords.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I
No,
just
you're
say,
right. You will make them more vulnerable, won't you? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Lawn. Yeah, go on.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You have to weigh it up. We might be doing the landlord a favour by bringing the costing down, but are we actually doing the residents of the housing a favour, not putting in the full the full criteria that we'd set?
No, and I think it's a very, very serious point, because we should and we must, and I think we always have actually at Broadland, put our residents first.
Yeah.
And particularly our vulnerable residents. So I think that's more than a fair argument for me.
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of the HMO licensing is to protect the occupants living in within those properties, who are, as you all correctly say, they're all already in a vulnerable position. A lot of them. So it is a really important work. I do feel really sort of passionate about this, really, which is why we've prioritised it and pushed it forward through all of this, really. So it would be. It is a really important piece of work, and I think this would be the next. It's quite disappointing that we can't sort of push forward.
And I think, Louise, I think you've done a really good job breaking this all down for us. So we can't. For me, there's no argument about what process you need to follow to ensure that you do a proper job here, and you've broken it down minute by minute. Okay, there could always be an argument that the letter takes 30 minutes to process or 10 minutes, but I'm sure some will be longer than others because of various reasons. But at the end of the day, you've done your best to present us detailed figures here, and I am content with that. But I think we need to call this to a close, really, and just let it move on to ONS. I know what Jamie's saying about South Norfolk are meeting tomorrow, and I think they need to make their own decisions. Obviously, their a panel could have the same view or a different view, but I think that's for them to make. I don't think we're going to come to an agreed conclusion tonight. So I think that's the end of the discussion for me. Okay, so thank you. So that's the end of the formal agenda. So I'll formally end the meeting now. So if you can all please bear in mind that the live stream may be running for a minute or two.